Well, welcome, guys.
Thank you, Stephen.
Welcome, Theo.
Thank you, Stephen.
Welcome, Johan.
Thank you, Stephen.
Three musketeers of GuanoBoost. This is our inaugural podcast, so we're going to be doing a prolonged series, I hope, not just about GuanoBoost, the industry, why what we do matters, but I think evolving it into soil health, sustainability of agriculture and farming. But I wanted to start maybe by, maybe just introducing ourselves to our audience. Theo, maybe if you give a bit of background about your story and how you had the idea for GuanoBoost and why we're all here.
Yeah, it's I don't know how it came about, but guano, for some reason, when I heard about it, I was drawn to it. And it's just one of those things that I couldn't explain, and really started wondering why this wonderful original fertilizer just disappeared off the face of the earth. Because the 1930s, that was the fertilizer.
Yeah.
And by the 1980s, it was completely fizzed out. And being drawn to it and intrigued at the same time, started doing a lot of research and found out there's still guano there, but in the South African market, it was almost nowhere and was used in small pockets of fertilizer, but the harvesting of the guano was done medieval style. It was just off islands and disturbing nesting of birds, and it wasn't a sustainable harvested source at that stage. So, and doing a bit more research and digging around, we realized that there's a sustainable source of the absolute best guano right on our border country of Namibia. And from there on, I think it just snowballed and moved into there.
Yeah. It's funny, you talk about guano having come in and out of fashion, and I mean, where our platforms are. I mean, if you might just explain how old those platforms are and how much investment was made at the outset to just harvest this raw material and how valuable it must have been.
Yeah, and for some reason, the first thing I want to go to is the ridicule that Aldo Winter had to go through, because he was a visionary. He was the guy that said, I don't want to harvest this off the islands. I don't want to damage these birds' ecosystem. I want to build a platform off the coast of Namibia, right between Swakop and Windhoek. And he literally took his savings, but there was a world war on. So he built this 4x4 meter platform to get the guano, and everybody laughed at him, called him a mad scientist, a crazy kook. It's just, and we experienced a lot of that as well.
Well, I was
more kook than scientist.
I was going to say, coming from one mad scientist to another, just maybe take us through, so they've been harvesting, processing, and selling essentially what was raw guano, powdered guano. Where did you get the idea to liquefy it from? And in particular, the whole idea of fermenting it and taking it through this fermentation process. Where did that come from?
There was another company that started in a similar direction in that, but the guano source was very fluctuating. The harvesting methods were medieval. And then the process that this guy followed was very unequal. It was just putting it in a tank and literally making a tea out of it. And the fluctuations in that was just massive. So I realized if we have to do this internationally, we have to mechanize this, and went back to nature and followed the manufacturing of beer and followed that example with the goodness of guano compared to the goodness of hops and wheat. And
well, you had plenty of practice.
Well, you can see it. So going back to nature, basically, and just following nature's way.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at so many products, like the benefit of fermentation, I mean, it's been around for thousands of years, I guess, fermented products and the benefit of that from a micro point of view. Yeah. So how did you guys get together? Maybe explain a bit about the backstory.
Yeah, I was a child from the wrong side of the tracks, and then I went to the Lani school, and this sounds weird, but I went to the Lani School in Pretoria North. So that's like
Northern suburbs of Pretoria.
Yeah, the wrong side of Pretoria, but also the wrong side of the tracks. And then I met Theo in Standard 6, what it was back then. And yeah, we just became friends from the age of 13, played rugby together all through high school, varsity, and then always just kept close friendship.
And the thing that really struck me, you know, when we met each other and started talking about this idea first was you were in Australia, I think, when you got this desire to come back to South Africa.
Well, yeah, I immigrated or moved to Australia when I was 26 years old. And that was after I studied for a career in construction. And then I was working on big LNG gas plants and iron ore plants. That's not, it's definitely not there to save the world. And there was just always a yearning hunger for me to return to Africa. And at that stage, I still had a journal while I was working out on site to say, I want to go back to Africa and I want to do something good. I don't want my life to be remembered by destroying the ecosystem.
Yeah.
It should be to actually protect what we have. And no idea what it would have been at that stage. I moved back to South Africa and actually bought my own farm to start farming as well. And so I was basically up in Lephalale and Limpopo, close to where Theo was living. He was going through that whole process of finding, a solution that's guano-based, and one thing led to another. And of course, at that stage, our paths started to cross. And that's probably your next question. So I think, when I returned, we met in the construction industry, and became good friends, and we worked together for a long time. And then when COVID hit, or it was actually before COVID, I approached you to say, look, I think this is a good opportunity for us to get involved with. And when we invested, of course, we started off literally in a tobacco shed up in Swartwater, and it was hand to mouth, if you can call it that, from the start for the first few years. Yeah, so that's the long and the short of it.
I still remember those first couple of times. It's literally waiting for a farmer to do a payment so you can get fuel to get to the next farmer, waiting at a filling station for half a day, never knowing where your next stop's going to be. It was just, Yeah.
It was incredible because, back then, I think it's fair to say we understood what the product could do, but we didn't understand why certain things were happening. Like the backstory that I always remember is when we were working with farmers in Swartwater and there was that really cold snap. Remember that? It was like in our first, when would it have been? June, July of 2020?
Yeah, it was almost August, yeah.
Yeah, of 2020. There was this real cold snap. And everybody that had applied GuanoBoost, their plants predominantly made a complete recovery, but all of the other farmers were wiped out. Maybe just talk about that story.
Yeah, it was actually on a pepper crop, and it was a cold snap, and in that area it doesn't generally get frost, and the frost went as low as -4 Celsius. And all the farmers that supported us, literally their peppers were perfect the next day when the sun came out. And the farmers that didn't use our product, it was just absolutely destroyed the crop. They had the harvest that was on the plants, and that was it. It was over. These guys, and then the prices actually jumped because nobody else was in production. Everything in the winter got frost except for these farmers. So the prices jumped to ridiculous heights, and these guys were they were actually smiling all the way to the bank.
And it was amazing because at the time, I guess we had a hunch, but we didn't fully understand why. Now we do, obviously. We understand all of the kind of technical reasons.
I think we understand about 25% now.
Yeah,
when we did 2.5% back then.
And there was this misconception about guano. Everybody thought it was the nitrogen in the guano. That's why it's doing this well. And on this journey and this realization and the research that we're doing and the endless testing that we're doing, we've realized that the nitrogen is absolutely the lowest contributor to all these amazing results we're getting.
Yeah. And, it's interesting, we're recording this, it's January of 2024, and it's almost we're standing at the edge of a complete change in the agricultural industry, not just in South Africa, but worldwide, we're talking currently to a major retailer, for example, in the UK. And when we were speaking to one of their sustainability managers the other day, he was saying that they have to reduce their chemical inputs, in some instances, by at least 100% to get to carbon zero targets. And, having started the business in South Africa, it was almost the most difficult place, Jan, to start an organic fertilizer and biostimulant business, because it doesn't have those regulatory or environmental or consumer pressures for organic like some of the European countries, for example.
Absolutely. And the only pressure that this South African farmer had at that stage, so we've been going for about 5 years now, we absolutely pitched it as an economic pressure relief, is that you are going to get an increased yield. Of course, it does, and there's benefits to that. But there's other major advantages, major upsides to using the product, which is not economically based.
Yeah.
In the long run, it's always going to be, but it's more environmental pressures, preserving your soil, making sure your kids can one day farm on the same land, that we're not depleting the soils. So a lot of Europe and the Western world are experiencing those problems, are experiencing those pressures from government and from consumers that we are not yet experiencing so much in South Africa, especially where, a lot of people are still, basically on the poverty line. So the consumer doesn't pressure the use of going organic, or at least reducing the use of synthetic and chemical inputs.
But what's going to actually bring that into the South African market is international pressure from retailers and food producers who want to get their carbon footprint down, but also carbon trading credit taxes, because of this offshoring of your carbon footprint into, other continents, other third world countries. It's definitely going to come here. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about, it's amazing how in a crisis you can start to truly understand the opportunity in that space. And Theo, maybe if you could talk about some of the instances when the fertilizer prices went so exponentially high, what our farmers started experimenting with GuanoBoost.
Yeah, it's a bit of a we would say a perfect storm, but a storm in the global economy and global situations, with COVID kicking off and the war in Ukraine with Russia. That was simultaneous, and farmers in Africa just couldn't access any form of fertilizer. So they were desperate and looking at us for a solution. And even though we said this is not a fertilizer complete replacement or eliminator, farmers started using this product and got amazing results, and almost couldn't believe how much savings they were doing. And the real results actually came the next year, when that farmer, most of our farmers go either no-till or a bit more sustainably orientated, but they would say their cover crop was so much better this year, and it was a below average rainfall. But I see earthworms in my plastic domes where I plant my vegetables, and those stories and rumors and everything started catching on. And I think that was a major factor in that aspect of our business at that stage.
Yeah, I mean, we had customers that planted dry beans and had incredible increases in yield. But then next year they planted maize in that field, didn't put any GuanoBoost, and still had a record yield of maize as the biology and the microbiology in the soil is reinvigorated. And I think as, our understanding of not just our own product, like through all the tests and analysis that we've done, through seeing all the applications, we've almost had a huge evolution in our understanding of what our mission in GuanoBoost is. And maybe, Jan, if you talk a bit about that, as we sort of currently sit here today, what is our purpose in the agricultural industry?
Yeah, I think, we started off 5 years ago in a completely different environment, completely different economic, political, and the world was in a different place. And I think, we all knew we wanted to do something good. That's the basis of it. Is that you can't commit your life to a cause that's going to be to the detriment of something. And at that stage, we the prospect of guano, as Theo expressed it and explained it to us, was like, oh yeah, I can understand. I'm also drawn to this as a solution. But if you don't know your product, you don't really even know what it's going to achieve over time. So it changed from just wanting to do something good to really understanding, what power you actually have in your hand with the product that you have and the change that you can bring with it. And so our mission has changed from just being good or doing good to being extremely targeted to say we can make a difference not only in the agricultural space, but also in the consumer space by reducing the use of chemical fertilizers in the consumer industry, 100%. But in the agricultural industry, we can make a big dent in using less fertilizers and also reducing carbon footprint, sequestrating more carbon back into the soil. It's very little that you get into an industry or a business where you say, we actually don't have any negative impact.
Yeah. And I think, Theo, this is one of the huge, opportunities for us as a business. It's not an and/or situation. Normally when you're in this space, you're either in the chemical input industry and you're vehemently opposed to organic, or you're in the organic and you're vehemently opposed to the chemical. We're not in that space. We're a partner for commercial farmers to reduce their chemical inputs far more sustainably and profitably.
Yes, and I think in the beginning of our business, it wasn't that case. Everybody looked at us and say, no, you're going to cancel this business and this industry, and that's absolutely not the case. We've even done our trials in cohesion with synthetic fertilizers by improving the uptake of that and taking hand in hand, because there's very few organic growers in South Africa, maybe on my one hand, that I know of. And the bulk of our agricultural business is to farmers that's still using synthetics and pesticides, but they're putting this organic nutrient or biostimulant in their program, bringing life back into the soil and just doing one good thing with a lot of the negative things. And slowly but surely coming into that more sustainable, more balanced way of producing our food.
Yeah. And, again, back to what I mentioned earlier, like our evolving understanding of our product. And one of the key areas of that is in terms of its carriers, the fulvic acid and the microbes. And not only the fact that the microbes are present in GuanoBoost, but the different strains. So, for example, the reason GuanoBoost has been able to help commercial farmers reduce nitrogen inputs is because of the ureas in GuanoBoost, which improves the mineralization and uptake of nitrogen. Where do you see that moving forward, Jon, in terms of our role in the commercial farming space?
It's education, I think. It's using our voice to explain and teach to the farmer and to the agribusiness what can actually be done. It's what we think was only possible 10 years ago is now fact. We know that, we've established it. I told you guys the other day about a post where there was an article in the Popular Mechanics in the 1960s where they say, do you have a problem? Don't you know what to do with your used tractor oil? Just dig a hole, put your oil in with a bit of dirt, cover it up. Before you know it, it will be absorbed by the soil. And that was fine.
Yeah,
but in the 60s, that's 60 years ago.
Sorry to interrupt you, Jon, but 150 years ago, we also knew that the earth was flat.
Exactly. So the answers are right in front of us. And if you look at modern medical information, is where there's so many people that's moving away from modern medicine and really looking at what can be done. I mean, if you look at all the new benefits of just breathing, cold plunging, there's so many other benefits and that's just by people studying it, understanding it, and then educating. If the voice and the message that we have just gets out to the farmers and to the agricultural industry, these things, it's already happening, but we just need to be out there and actually say, and educate. That's where I'm thinking.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point you raise, and the analogy to the medical industry, because, I've been doing a lot of studying of longevity, for example, and just health and wellness lately. And one of the guys that I follow is Dr. Peter Aeta, and he talks about the 3 phases of medicine and how we're moving into a completely new phase. So medicine 1.0 was all about sterilization. Doctors eventually realized if they didn't have clean hands.
Don't use the blade that you chop the wood with to amputate your patient's leg.
Precisely. And then medical 2.0 was all about curing people, or at least finding a pharmaceutical solution that would keep them alive, but keep them taking medicine for their entire lives. But it was very bad at preventing those illnesses. And now we're moving into a whole new phase, which is medicine 3.0. And I think we're in a similar space in agriculture. I think now our understanding of soil biology, of the importance of microbial life, and the whole 60 harvests left movement, the benefits of it, just the exponential return on investment and the longevity of your farm of taking action now.
Yeah, I love that. I love that analogy, because even if you look at medical 2.0, we're trying to do something good, but there's always side effects.
Yes.
There's with curing something or trying to help, there's side effects. With medical 3.0, which is prevention,
yes,
there's no side effects. There's nothing negative about it.
There's no downsides.
There's no downsides to it, and that's where we are with organic plant nutrition and moving back to what nature is giving us. It's nature. There's no downsides. There's no negative impacts. There's no side effects to it. It's all just positive.
We're not advocating when you've got a bullet wound to put a Band-Aid on, but take your vitamins every single day. You'll benefit from it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, back to what we spoke about a minute ago, what is our mission at this stage? It's to be a partner in the process with commercial farmers. It's not to demonize the industry as it currently stands, far from it. We see ourselves as a valuable partner in that.
Yeah, absolutely. A stakeholder that's been there for 5 years now, and hopefully be there for the next 50 years.
Yeah. So it's an interesting point. Like, where do you see the industry going, Theo, in the next 5 years? I think even when we started, right, you often said, don't mention organic, you'll get chased off the farm.
It was like a swear word.
Yeah, that's just 5 years
ago.
ago.
Organics, that's snake juice.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. And now it's become a common phrase, and a lot of people use the word organic very loosely as well, because there's a difference between it contains organic materials, but it's organic materials and synthetic.
Yeah.
Or it's certified organic like our products. There's a massive difference. There's no synthetic materials. And that mindset or misconception is still being broken down today. If you go to any agricultural shop or something, half the products will say something organic on it, but less than 5% will be organic.
Yeah. And where do you see the trends, Jan, of the industry going over the next 5 years? If you look at the rate of change, even in the last 2 years, the recent Fertasa, the South African Fertilizer Association Emporium, for the first time, I think, ever, made a big, focus on biostimulants and organic inputs.
Yeah, it was quite mind-blowing to see that the Fertilizer Association of South Africa has a symposium to discuss basically the importance of biostimulants in the agricultural industry and how effective they are. And they had speakers from the US, University of California, University of Adelaide in Australia, talking about these topics. And so there's no doubt that the commercial agricultural industry is moving towards a more sustainable way. But we also have to understand the farmer. And I grew up on a farm. I've owned my own farm. Theo knows a lot of our friends are farmers. And we need to respect the fact that they need to make money at the end of the day. It's their bread and butter. So they will always be skeptical towards making big changes if it's been working for a long time. But it is happening slowly but surely. On the consumer side, the homeowner, we just see a massive, there's such a big move towards using organic, safe materials in our gardens, where it absolutely makes more sense. That's where your kids play, that's where your animals, your pets, that's where you live. And there's no reason, because we're not we're not mining the earth in our gardens, so there's no need for chemicals. So I think the move towards a more sustainable garden is going to come just as quick as it will to produce more sustainable food.
Yeah, it's really interesting you bring that up, because when you look at CO2 reduction, there's simply put, there's two aspects to it. One is reducing the amount of CO2 that you're mitigating through the manufacture, application and volatilization avoidance, and that's the fertilizers evaporating. But the other is one of carbon sequestration, and that is when plants take carbon from the atmosphere into the microbial life and the roots, send that into the soil, and it gets essentially packed into the soil forevermore. And I don't think anybody is aware of the impact of the home consumer, Theo, and how their lawn can actually play a role in helping solve climate change.
Yeah, I've always had this picture of this endless cornfields in America, and you just see these massive tractors running for days in these cornfields. And even though that you see these massive cornfields and you hear the stories about the Dust Bowl, and domestic lawns is still the biggest crop in the United States of America.
40 million acres.
Yeah.
What's that, like 20
million
hectares. Yeah.
It's like 10 Kruger National Parks.
It's insane.
Just domestic lawns where you don't need any synthetic fertilizer. You can just put down organics. And that lawn, the amount of carbon that sequestrates, I don't think people have done the math. If they just convert their lawn to an organic lawn and maintain it sustainably, it's unfathomable.
Yeah, and I think that's the opportunity that we want to be part of. Is helping home consumers not only reduce chemicals from their lawns and gardens and all of the downstream impact of that, it's giving them an opportunity to play their part in helping solve climate change. And then for the agricultural industry, it's finding that sweet spot, Johan, that you've always talked about of long-term sustainability and profitability.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think over the next couple of podcasts, we're really going to explore in a bit more detail about what is GuanoBoost. I think that's almost been a moving target as we spoke about earlier, studied the product more, analyzed it more. Theo, the amount we've learned and continue to learn. I read today, for example, they've just discovered a completely new enzyme in our guts. We don't even know all of the enzymes in GuanoBoost at this stage. We haven't been able to test them all. Yeah. There isn't the equipment to test them all, I don't think.
No, not yet. Yeah. Not in South Africa.
Yeah.
You can't measure what you don't even know is there.
Exactly.
It's really a new science that's being uncovered. What we know of soil science even now is just the tip of the iceberg.
And I think I'm going to bring it back to that medical analogy. Again, a big part of Medical 3.0 is you have to become the CEO of your own health. Our generation is probably the last generation that's going to grow up knowing that if I've got something wrong, I'm going to go to the doctor and the doctor's going to give me a tablet and that tablet's going to fix me. That's gone now. You have to become the CEO of your own health. You have to take long-term proactive measures, whether it's through diet, exercise, whatever it is. And it's the same for our farmers. That era of relying completely on just one source of knowledge, it's over.
Single element farming.
Yeah. And the more we start to uncover about what it is that products like GuanoBoost do and the impact they have on the soil and the importance of soil health, each farmer needs to become almost the CEO of that project, don't they?
Absolutely. Now, again, put yourself in a farmer's shoes 50 years ago on the Limpopo River, close to Swartwater. You probably had a landline, maybe, if you were lucky to be connected on a telephone. No electricity, no agronomy advice, no internet, no information. You were left to your own devices to survive out there.
And
30 years ago.
Maybe water every 7 years when the river came down.
And now we're same with health. People, the information wasn't there. The information revolution hasn't happened. Now all of this information is there. People can share it. People can talk about it. New ideas, new topics that educate, so that you can take control of your own health. But that is what we are seeing with our farmers as well. The younger generation farmers are now coming back to say, look, I understand that that's how you used to farm because your dad farmed like that and you didn't know of any other information. But there's a wealth of information now. You can study, you can talk to people, you can listen to podcasts, you can evolve and manage your farm so that you don't have the side effects. We can start to cut out the side effects and the downsides.
And I think that is our goal with this podcast. So over the next weeks, months, and hopefully years, we're going to continue to understand and share what we've learned through the thousands of farmers and tens of thousands of home consumers we work with, but also by reaching out to other industry experts and trying to create a platform where we're sharing this information. So thanks for joining. I hope you found this interesting and look forward to catching up with you guys again next week.
Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thanks, Sean.